we are welcoming this evening Sheetal to join us and talk to us about leadership. Such an important topic, and I love talking about leadership. It's so powerful. Leadership is Language. It's a great book by Lieutenant David McKay. If you've seen the Turn the Ship Around book, he talks about trying to create leaders at all levels in an organization. And there's a huge shift in the way leadership has been done over the past, well, hundreds of years, and it seems to be evolving pretty rapidly as well. So we are delighted to have Sheetal joining us to teach us some things about leadership. And Sheetal is a leader, a specialist in agile leadership. I actually had Sheetal join me on our podcast to talk about agile leadership as well recently.
We did. That was fun. I really enjoyed the leadership bingo. That was fun.
Oh, I forgot we did leadership bingo. That was a bit random. We basically came up with some topics relating to leadership, and it was bingo if you'd experienced it. You'd face that in the workplace, and then we started to talk about how we can navigate that particular leadership challenge. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute a few folks because I'm going to hear some background noise, and then we will kick off. Just for awareness, questions-wise, Sheetal has built-in interactivity throughout the session today. I will be manning the chat to check in, and if there are questions, do ask. And if we do have too many questions at any point, we'll just put some time towards the end to make sure they are addressed. Now, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Sheetal. She will do a better introduction than I have. And yes, let's do this. Over to you, Sheetal. Share away.
So, today I would like to talk to you about the transformation of leadership from commanding to being more human. So, first question is, did you know that 75% of employees do not quit their jobs, but they actually quit their bosses? How many of you would agree or disagree to that? And share your thoughts, either in the chat or you can just speak outright.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. Do you have a story to share that you might want to share with us?
Yeah, sure. That's actually one of the things that I do whenever I'm interviewing, prepping for my coworkers. I tell them you're actually interviewing the interviewer for a job because that's eventually who you're going to work with. So to keep in that mindset, and I do the same thing anytime I'm interviewing, I don't have to choose that position. So I think of it that way. So I always base it on the people and not the actual job.
Yeah, that's a great shout. Anybody else?
Yeah, I did a temporary job recently for a few months, and some of the staff were amazing, and actually the managers were great, but the staff in between, some of the supervisors, made things very difficult. So I didn't leave because I hated them. I left for other reasons, but that was part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it tends to be how we feel in an organization and how we interact with other people in an organization is a really essential part of our own happiness at work, so to speak. So I think it really makes a difference where you enter a work environment where there is a good synergy, there's good cultural values, and there are people that you can connect with. So, just a very quick thing about me. I put a whole load of data in here, but I'll just work through it very quickly. My name's Sheetal. I started my whole career in software development. We're talking years ago because I was one of the early developers for the first ever online banking app. Since then, I've built and designed so many famous websites. Sky Store to name one as an example, and Nectarcard to name another one. Don't really want to name drop those. So from that point, we then moved over to product development, where I worked on the development of working with key customers to build a loyalty card service, a credit auction tool, current accounts, and I also worked with Big Pharma as well. From product development, I then jumped into business development, where I worked with shipping companies, banking, and startups. And it was in between these two. So you can see this lovely picture of the sea and a castle there. Believe it or not, my experience really came to life in an agile way when I moved to France. So you can see a picture of Nice. And also you can also see this wonderful castle, which is actually the home that I stayed in for a whole year while I was in France. So I really love sharing this story. So my view is anything's possible. But I was introduced to Agile in France, and from that point onwards, I came back and everything was Agile. My whole world started to evolve around Agile. I did change for banks, retail, big pharma, I supported several tech consultancies on their Agile transformations. I started to speak about Agile. I did meetups for Agile. I'm now even doing conferences in Agile, and I also still plan barbecues and parties using Agile ways of working. So that's me in a nutshell. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just read this speech, this quote, and tell me what comes to mind. So if you want to use a chat window for a second, tell me what impact this would have on yourself if you were an employee of this leader. If you just want to put that in the chat window for a second. So the quote is, "I completely understand why someone doesn't want to commute an hour and a half every day. Totally get it. Doesn't mean they have to have a job here either." How does that make you feel?
So in the chat, Sheetal, someone says dispensable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard this exact thing myself when I was working for a company as well. That exact, maybe it's a very slight twist on it, but it was, yeah, it's pretty much, it's coming into the office, or yeah, you can find somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. And this is actually a recent leadership quote. It's not even an old one. I don't want to actually say who it is, but if anyone knows who it is, you'll be able to tell. You'll recognize this individual straight away. So this is actually something I experienced. Now, I personally was not commuting an hour and a half every day, but the knock-on effect that I saw when this particular speech was quoted was there was suddenly a huge turnaround of employees. People decided they did not want to work with a company whose leaders would talk in such a manner to their employees because they did not feel valued. My response was this, and not just my response, everyone else in the organization also responded in a very similar way. Not to be taken lightly at all, but this was a sign of a leader that doesn't fit in today's world of work, as far as I'm concerned, but also has a negative impact on their employees as a result of what's been said. Now, it may have been taken out of context, it may not have been meant in such a way, but the way it's come across has had a bit of a negative impact. Now, this kind of leadership we call the authoritarian leader. They command authority. It's top-down leadership, so they are 100% in control. They don't invoke fear. They need predictability, so there's no room for error. There is a sense of resistance to change, and traditional values are being leveraged to run such an organization. They hire and fire based on performance and pretty much deliver for their shareholders. Any thoughts on this type of leader? Has anyone come across someone like this before? And feel free to just unmute yourselves to chat about this.
I've been there. One of them.
Yeah, it's a hard place to be. And it's a hard place to be at the receiving end as well. But the good news is times are changing and the world is flipping, and leadership styles are also changing as we're starting to come into 2024 even. So any thoughts on this one? So if you had a leader in your organization that said, what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived, it is what the difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead. How would that make you feel if you were working for a company whose leader would talk in this manner? You just drop your thoughts in the chat window.
So someone reacted with a bit of a heart emoji.
Yeah. Yeah, you're more likely to want to work with such a company.
Someone said
and such a
inspired.
leadership as well. Absolutely.
Inspired, and that it shows empathy to others, leaving a mark, wanting to give a positive impression. And it would also, someone said that it resonated with them. Alexa said it resonated with them.
Yes, it is. We all want to make a difference in the work that we do. And if a leader can actually invoke that in their organization, then you are certainly going to be part of an organization that can actually make a huge difference to customers and service providers as well. But not just externally, but also internally as well. You call this kind of leader a charismatic leader. They inspire with speeches and very firm, strong actions. So they say what they're going to do. They bring everyone on board towards common goals. They focus on quality and team building. They leverage against moral values and they create a following. Now, this charismatic leader started to emerge in the 1970s and 80s. And also at the same period, you've got a big change where the Women's Liberation March started to come across, and this was then creating gender and diversity awareness. So, gender D&I, as we call it today, is something that's not just been a big hot topic today. It's been a hot topic since the 70s, and there has been such leaders that would actually bring that awareness to the fore and start integrating different genders and diverse people from diverse backgrounds into their work world. Any comments on that? Any thoughts? No. Okay. Next
The
one.
one thing that comes to
sorry,
mind for me is that I think you can have a leader who is very charismatic. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
So someone could
agree
be
with that.
really great at inspiring a following and sharing their ideas and getting people to support and buy into them. But it doesn't mean that the thing they're buying into is good or helpful. And the change they might be creating might be a really bad change.
That's true.
And
That is so true.
without wanting to give really, really bad examples, I can think of a certain person who made a certain mustache no longer able to be worn by anyone around the world, who was obviously clearly very good at inspiring a lot of people,
Yes.
not necessarily in a good way.
No, and he does actually fall under the category of a charismatic leader because he was able to create such a following and focus on building that community despite their moral values not being on the right path. So yes, you're 100% right. From an organizational point of view, the focus is still very much on shareholder value as well. So I just wanted to put that out there as well for this one. Any thoughts on this one? So if you had a leader who said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do, we hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. What comes to mind when you work for a company like this or a leader like this?
I think they sound great.
Yeah, it gets better, doesn't it? Try to keep things positive. Yeah, so at the end of the day, what this is saying is it's all about a transformational leader. They're visionaries. What they're doing is actually empowering their people. So they're focusing on user experience. So, for example, Steve Jobs, the picture that you saw before, he created the 1,000 songs in your pocket, which was focused on user experience, and it was done in such a clever way that it excelled all possibilities. What you'll find with a transformational leader is that they do tend to be subject matter experts, and what they have been doing over the years is leveraging computer power. So transformational leaders tend to be your Steve Jobs, your Bill Gates, this guy from Netflix, I forget his name now. It's not good. But they tend to have high emotional intelligence. So they're familiar with their surroundings, but they also have this entrepreneurial spirit where they know how to take what I would call an existential risk. Now, Steve Jobs is a good example of an existential risk taker. I don't know if any of you know the story of Xerox and their Park Research organization. I can't see any nodding heads, so you're going to have to say yes or no.
Nobody's responding.
No.
I'm seeing some shaking heads.
No?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me share that story. So Xerox were obviously providers for photocopying machines, but they wanted to be that transformational leader who did other things. So what they did is that they wanted to they created a research center called Parks. I forget what the abbreviation is now, but look it up. It's quite interesting. They hired the best computer scientists they could find, and they set up this Park Center where they would try new things. So it was a huge building where you could just do lots of different experiments and see what computing power you can bring to the surface. they managed to bring to the surface 3 core functionalities that are kind of natural to us in the normal world today, which is graphical user interfaces, network topologies, and there was another one, but I forget what it was. Does anybody know what the third one might have been? It was emails. So it was communication using technology and networks. And it was all very, very great, very amazing stuff. But Xerox's leadership didn't feel that it was adding much value to their organization. Now, the computer scientists at Park were very much excited about all these new findings and these new experiments that they'd founded. So what they would do is they would invite other software engineers to come and check out the new technology that they were developing. And Steve Jobs initially wasn't interested. But as time went on, a lot more people started to say, hey, you need to come and check out what these guys are up to at Xerox. So he did pay a visit to Xerox. And there he was introduced to the network topology format, so different networking power, but also the email email communicator, to how to sort of send emails across networks. But his big interest was actually the graphical user interface. He could see that going at 1,000 miles an hour. And what he did was take an existential risk by going back to Apple, stopping all manufacturing of all of their computers, and pivoting to build the graphical user interface. And that was an existential risk that he took. That was either going to make or break Apple. Fortunately, it made Apple. So that's what you would really call a transformational leader, is somebody who can make a change, knowing what the future knock-on effect can be. And not only that, he kind of had a feeling he knew what the customer wanted. And this is where suddenly we're changing our mindsets from thinking about what shareholders want to knowing what customers want, which then has a knock-on effect on shareholders anyway. It's hard to beat a person who never gives up. This is Babe Ruth, I think. Or Ruth Babe. Forget which way around his name is. This was a quote from him.
Babe Ruth.
Babe Ruth, thank you. Famous baseball player. What are your thoughts? What kind of leader, what kind of company do you think you might be working for if you're working for a leader who sort of quotes something along these lines?
Typing, hold on, hold fast. Responses are coming. One that will try anything to make it happen.
Yep, absolutely. Yes. So this is someone who never gives up, someone who believes in trial and error, probably, someone who fails fast. What we have here is a startup leader. So again, visionaries. In this case, you'll find that a startup leader is often more of a coding genius, a risk taker, quite ethical and transparent about what they're doing. This is where open source started to kick in. So you're talking around the 90s, early 90s, late 2000s, maybe a little bit before that, actually, sort of like late 1980s as well. They leverage the passion of their new idea and go with it. They're resilient and they're experimental. So they will do trials and errors in order to fail fast and build quick as well. They're very resourceful. They're team builders. They're good at testing unknown markets, and they're very curious about what their customers want. So here are a few people who are very good examples of being a startup leader. So any thoughts on that?
They're all men. Why are they all men?
A good point. Good question. That's changing. Don't worry about that. But good point. Yes. I think Google just seems to call these.
Yeah, you should have put some women in there, I feel.
Thank you. That's good feedback, and I will make sure that I will change this image going forward. Okay, the next one. Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. What kind of company do you think you'll be working for if you had a leader that would share such a quote?
This could be interesting. Like, they might be quite a dynamic company and quite forward thinking, but they could also be a bit dangerous. Like if they're going into the unknown without having thought about it. So I'd want to ask a few questions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're talking here the disruptive leader. So here you're talking about the game changers. They challenge what we know today to be true. They learn from the failure of others, or they learn from the success of others, actually. I want to just put that out there. They enhance technologies, so you'd also call them innovators as well to some degree. They simplify products. Their customer needs are in control, so they have full idea of what their customer needs are. And what they tend to do in some cases is leverage network and satellite capabilities. So what they're doing is they're entering a bit of a global market. So they see the potential of networks, they see the potential of the internet, and they want to go large. And that's what's happened. So what you've got here is a disruptive leader. Any questions on this? Any thoughts?
I think I'm working in a bit of this space already. Sounds like my
So,
boss.
yeah, okay, cool. That's not a bad idea. That's not bad, really. So when you've got game changers, what you've also got as part of your organization are people who can also innovate. There should be room to experiment. There should be room to innovate. There should be room to try new things and also tap into different markets as well and experiment on ideas. So I think to some degree, disruptive leaders, they've kind of entered the markets in kind of 2010, I think. I would say 2005 from then onwards, I think you've started to see disruptive leaders emerge. Okay, here's a lady for you. Nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible. Who do you think you'd be working for?
Actually does remind me of somebody that I used to work for who was a woman, and I worked for her marketing company for 4 years because we were quite a small company, but she totally respected everyone and taught us and then gave us scope to do what we were good at and what we wanted to learn about, and was probably the most amazing person I've ever worked for, and still follow her principles. So
Oh, amazing, amazing. Do share her name in the chat. It'd be lovely to kind of know who that person is and learn more about them.
I don't know what she's doing now. So
Okay, well, yeah, I think this is where we're headed to, as in terms of like a strong leader. You're talking about the innovative leader. So I do have Elon Musk as an example of that because he was someone who focused on making something that sounded impossible possible, like sending their car into space. That was quite a big deal. So they had this dream, they had this vision of making something that sounded absolutely impossible and then showed that it can actually be possible. So there is some continuous disruption, but then there's this extra, going the extra mile. The innovative leader learns from others. So it's a bit like the lady you mentioned just now, who wants to leverage and help other people grow by sharing learnings and also learning from them as well, I'm sure. They make room to experiment into the unknown. They understand the need for speed. They adopt agility for adaptability. They leverage data they run experiments and they capture customer feedback. Learning is a focal point, an empowering point of such a leader and their such organizations. And the key thing is that they're learning from outcomes. Any other questions on this? Any thoughts? No? And apparently this car.
How big is
Oh,
coming through?
yes.
Someone says they agree. You might need
Okay.
just to pause like an extra 10 seconds after you ask a question, Sheetal, because
Okay.
typing happens and there's a little bit of delay. So
Okay. Thank you.
someone says
Thanks.
they
It's
agree.
good to know. Great. Great. Now I'm glad you agree. So this particular car is currently in Mars, believe it or not. So I thought that was quite impressive. So what about today and what about tomorrow? What kind of leaders do you think we need for today's world and tomorrow's world? What kind of styles, what kind of characteristics would you expect today?
I'd actually really like an answer to this question because I used to work in marketing, and then I had kids and I went to uni, and then I did a digital marketing course last year, and I thought I could get back into that business because I work for myself. I've got a lot of skills. I run meetups. I have an eBay store. I do loads of things.
Wow.
And I wasn't getting through with job applications. So I was thinking that maybe I'm too different and I'm too entrepreneurial for today's marketplace. So I just love someone else to answer this because I don't know what people want.
Okay, that's fine. Anyone else got some thoughts on this? Thank you for that.
I would say we need leaders who are aware and know how to navigate the future development of our demographic of the workforce.
Yes.
Because those examples where people command other people back into an office and do not really consider them, those times are over.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So the kind of leader we're looking for, is it an authoritarian leader who commands people? Probably not. Is it charismatic leader who builds communities? I think building communities is still important, so I think maybe. Is it a transformation leader who knows how to empower their people? I think transformation still plays a big part in what we're doing, but I think there's coming to a stage where transformations are happening and we're now starting to go into a different way of working. And you just nailed it on the head just by saying that we do live in a different world today. Are we looking for a startup leader who helps us journey into the unknowns? I think personally, I think the unknown's already been tapped. There are other unknowns out there. Not sure what they are yet, but AI is a big key player here. Is it a disruptive leader that challenges the status quo, or is it the innovative leader that makes the impossible possible? So here is Sheetal's answer that, well, nearly there. This is the kind of mindset of a leader that we need for today. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Hands up if you agree with that.
People are raising hands or thumbing up.
Great. Today we have what we would call the adaptive leader. So the adaptive leader is a combination of all characteristics, all different styles, all different traits. But the main thing is that they leverage diversity in many different points, in different ways, from people points, from data points, from different technologies, the emerging of technologies, and also leveraging artificial intelligence. You'll find a lot of articles and video debates and YouTube debates even, and LinkedIn articles on the idea of how AI is now shaping and changing the future. It is a world where we're going to need to start adapting. This is coming, and this is coming on strong, it's coming in fast. We need to be able to make room to pivot and adapt. I have a good example of that, where I had to pivot and adapt my own company from one name to another, which was, I managed to do that in the space of a week, thankfully. But it was all from feedback. We have to learn to find a way to pivot and adapt where it's absolutely necessary from our own existential organizations being even. Not only do we need to do that, I think taking care of your people and nurturing the well-being of your people is absolutely essential in today's day and age. Now, COVID brought that to the forefront of us, and it really pretty much smacked us in the face with it. And I think the outcome of that made us realize that actually we do need to really think long and hard about how we treat our people in our organization. We need to care for them as much as we care for our customers. We need to care for them as much as, you know, they need, as not just caring for them, but also things that they care about. We need to care about those things too. For example, their families, their children, their other ambitions, their education, their training, their growth. I think there's so many different facets that we need to start thinking about in terms of nurturing people. And I'm talking about this in so much passion because I think it's such an essential part of an adaptive leader. They create spaces to learn and also fail very quickly. They lead with empathy and absolute influence. They build that following, but do it in a positive way. So it has to be in the direction where everybody can see the benefits of the idea that they're trying to bring forward and the objectives that they want to take forward. It includes their people in decision making. They learn from market activity, and they respond to change quickly. What this means is that they're a bit more human. So they will coexist with their people to build great things. They will coexist to collaborate with their people. So they're coming down from those ivory towers now. Let's come on the floor and start working together, and let's start working better together. they will make room to innovate. They know that innovation is a big factor here, and if they don't innovate, they're probably going to die out eventually. They know how that they must transform, and it's a continuous process. It's not something you do once and forget about. It doesn't work like that. Transformation is an ongoing thing. It's an evolution. They listen, they listen and they learn. They know that they work better together. They experiment and, of course, they adapt. So these are the leaders that you need to be looking out for when you're working in your new organizations. A few examples here, some old, some new, some male, some female as well. Sorry about that. I didn't put, wanted to put Sarah Blakely in actually earlier, and I thought I had done, but I hadn't. Any questions on an adaptive leader? What are your thoughts on that idea of a new kind of leader and that kind of characteristic of a new leader?
There's one of these emojis being thrown up, hands in the air.
Yay, nice, like that.
And another
I think
heart emoji.
I think that sounds great, and I would totally be that kind of leader. But what I'm seeing in job descriptions is not that.
No.
Like it's all about metrics and performance and all that kind of thing, which is important. But unless you can motivate people and you can get them to sign on to the project that you're doing together, so it's going to be good for them as well as for the company. I don't know.
I think this is where organizations still have a long way to go, and I agree with that. These are, in some worlds, still buzzwords. They're not actually, there's not so much meaning attached to the back of it. And I think this is something we need to offer, like an open up kind of training opportunities and coaching opportunities where we work with leadership and actually start helping them in realizing this is the way forward. This is how you're going to survive organizations today, because the world is changing and it's changing very, very quickly. And it is a matter of keeping up, really. So anyway.
As you say that, some oh, sorry.
Go ahead. You're good.
As you were saying that, Sheetal, what came up for me is I think also as Agilists, we're supposed to teach HR because the hiring process is in the hands of HR people, and I think we failed miserably up until now.
Yeah, I think they're only starting
to teach them how to hire Agile people who will then build that body of the workforce that is Agile.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for even Agilists to realize that there are changes. So for us to even keep up with like common trends in different organizations, and I think most Agilists, correct me if I'm wrong here, they've worked in so many different organizations. They've seen what works. They've seen an authoritarian leadership take place. They've seen a startup leader. They've seen an innovative leader. But also they've played a big hand and a big part in actually catalysting change at potentially maybe at the cusp of leadership level, but maybe not actually at the leadership level. And I think this is where it's time for us coaches to also start training up the leadership as well and saying, hey guys, when we're structuring your organization, when we're looking at your people, here are some key characteristics and key values and key cultural shifts that you're going to need to make. And starting from there. And I think there's still, like I said, a lot of work to be done for this to be realized, really. And I just hope it'll happen soon.
So, sorry, I find this whole concept of Agile working quite interesting because when I was working as a marketing professional, I was an account director and I'd freelance in companies, in agencies mainly. And it wasn't a term then. And but this way of working where you were collaborating was definitely a thing we did. And I've been running meetups since 2017 and met a lot of different people doing a lot of different jobs and run workshops and all this kind of thing. And I feel that what I've learned from running meetups and managing a whole load of different people from different backgrounds, including internationals, would be really useful to go into a company and help them to communicate better with each other.
Yeah.
But I don't really know how to get myself into those companies, which
Yeah,
probably
it's a
doesn't make sense because I run meetups. I know loads of people, but I don't know where they, I mean, just,
I think maybe it might be worth connecting and exploring that a bit more, because that is something that I'm looking to do as well, is to try and get the right coaches in to the right organizations to then coach the leaderships with the right approaches as well. So it could be something we can collaborate on.
yeah, it's quite interesting. Yeah, that's why I came to your meetup because I thought it was
Thank
insightful.
you. Yeah.
Some
So
good insights. I just wanted to add there was one thing I wanted to add on to this, and that was
sure.
around the first thing that came to mind for me when we were talking about adaptive leadership was that there isn't necessarily one leadership style that
No,
is perfect, because it's not a one size fits all, and it's the
exactly.
ability to respond and choose how you approach something based on what you're facing.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, there's often that assumption that the autocratic or the dictator style, which just commands and controls, is immediately bad, but
Mm,
sometimes it's completely necessary.
it is. It is.
If you're faced with a scenario where you don't have the time to decide, and you need to take action because things are already going wrong, then it's necessary to step up and say, "Hey, this is what we need to do right now," because otherwise, there are consequences. And the
Yeah.
pandemic is a great example of that, right? There wasn't time for many leaders around the world to say, "Hey, here's the outcome, folks. We're going to collaborate and discover the answer together."
So
Instead,
true.
they need to say, "Look, people are dying on a daily basis. Here are some rules that are going to get us the
Mhm.
starting point, and we're going to work out and find out what the solution is, over time. But right now, this is what we need to do."
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
and I agree
sometimes
with
that's
that.
the leadership style that's necessary, right?
Yes, yes, it is 100% necessary. And there are going to be times where you're going to have to be that command and controller. I think the key message is what I'm trying to deliver is don't be that person all the time, because you're going to lose people. What we want to do is we want to be able to kind of put on different leadership styles and hats and be different characteristics. And it's a big job in itself to really kind of switch your mindset, so you go, right, let's deal with the situation at hand and see it for what it really is, rather than not see it for what it is, or just kind of start, throwing your toys out the pram for whatever reason, or finger pointing. It's not about that anymore. And I think it's such certain behaviors don't work, but not to say that those certain behaviors do work in certain circumstances, if that makes sense.
But surely you still get leaders in companies who are pompous old men who want to do everything the way that they've always done it and
Yeah,
fuck anyone else who wants to do it differently. And that's,
pretty
I mean,
much.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that was kind of
how do
it.
you deal with that? How do you convince
Um,
them that?
so how do you convince people like that? I think the key thing is letting. So you need to kind of give them a sense of control. So it's almost like let them let them imagine, let them see things for what they are, but let them make the decisions as if it's their idea. But you've got to, when we're coaches, we can guide that a bit better. So put some strategies in place and say, right, okay, here's what your people are saying, what do you want to do about it, for example. And it's not easy. And some people are sort of like do have their heels dug in, and there's some people that you just cannot change. But what I would say is always focus on those people that are open and embracing changes, because they are the people that are going to make great things happen versus those that don't want to change anything at all. So I have a little quote for you. How leaders lead define how your people succeed. I really think how we perform in an organization is pretty much down to how and who is leading the company as well. Um, I have a funny saying, people see, people do. And so if you see an authoritarian leadership in your organization, the chances are you'll start adopting such characteristics yourself in that organization. But if you see a leader working from an empathetic point of view, and they're innovating with you, or they've got this vision that they want to share with you, and they're being transformational, you will also be that transformational person within that organization. And I think there is a domino effect from all characteristics. So really think about that. And if you are a leader, think about what silent leader you will be. But I also wanted to ask you, did you notice anything interesting when I was pulling these together?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
So with the quotes, did you notice anything interesting in the quotes? I didn't say who or where or what year, but did you notice I did put some pictures on? Did you sort of see a pattern anywhere? That's okay, I'll give it away. This information, these characteristics, these styles, even an adaptive leader, it's not new. It's been coming through the ages for as long as we can remember. So like right back to the 1800s. So it's not something that's new to this world. It's not something that's new to organizations. It's something that has been prevalent in different organizations at different points in time. So which then also sort of dictates and shows and highlights the success of some organizations versus others as well. So I just wanted to share that as well. Today, even though new technologies are emerging, you've got artificial intelligence coming into the forefront, how we lead those changes we should be able to reach out to historical figures, historical characteristics, and pull on them. Henry Ford's another good example, which I've not put in here. Sarah Blakely's a great example of transformational leadership as well. There are so many kind of advocates that we can really run by and sort of like take learnings from. So that's me in a nutshell. Chris, thank you so much for having me. You can find me on LinkedIn, guys. If you want to email me, you're welcome to email me at sheetal@formagility.com or find out more about what we do at formagility.com. And that's it.
Amazing. I'm just going to that, folks. There are some things that we have in this tool called reactions. If you were to press react, you have the ability to react with emojis, and you have the ability to react with soundboard. I invite you to react with some sound, or however you prefer to do so, to just show a bit of appreciation for Sheetal taking time to share her insights with us today.
Yay!
Nice.
I love that.
And I'm guessing that we have the opportunity to ask more questions and chat a bit
Of
further.
course.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Anyone got anything else to add or ask?
I'd just like to say that this app is interesting. Butter. I'd never come across it before. They just use Zoom and Meet, and I like this. It's visually a bit more appealing and a bit easier to navigate.
Good to know. Good to know. I'll pass on the feedback. Yeah, it's something that we use here at this meetup because of the reasons you mentioned. Right, it's a bit more seamless. It's a bit more energizing. It helps bring keep the focus. Yeah.
So can I use it for my stuff? Like, or is it just?
No, I own it personally.
It's a public thing, right? Okay. Right.
I'm joking. Yes, there is the ability to use this. I can pass on a link for you to give it a trial. So yeah.
Okay. Got you there, didn't they? So I just wanted to apologise. I couldn't see who was talking while I had the show presented. So forgive me if I wasn't able to say your names. Usually I don't like to do that. But I've just from the sound, Alexa, I think it was you who had some of the questions around what the next generation of leadership styles was. So I think I recognised your voice there.
Sorry. Yes.
Press something didn't work. Anyway, are there any further questions for Sheetal?
Is anybody else a leader or consider themselves a leader at work? Or run their own business? Or, it'd be nice to hear from people who didn't say anything. Maybe put something in the chat, just if you want.
I did speak and in the chat, but I will say I have been in leadership positions before. Unfortunately, this past April, I did get laid off. So I did have to restart and press the refresh button. but I am looking forward to being in that position again. So that's why I am, you know, being proactive and taking these courses and things like that that are available to me. So I've been around the block.
Cool. Well, that's probably one thing I could share with you. I don't know if it's coming yet, but I'm going to a session tomorrow where I'm going to be exploring this in a bit more detail, um, with a course brimming in mind. Whether something comes of it or not, I don't know yet. It depends if it reasons with me, but there could be something in the pipeline that I'd be happy to share via Chris if that's of interest.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I would be happy to.
I think for me, it was interesting because I was in a leadership position before and with my company for 15 years. So since I did get laid off, it kind of gave me better insight to being, I don't want to say at the bottom because that's not the right entry level, I should say, back in a position, because then it's like, wow, you know, was I the best leader that I could have been in those situations, you know? So it actually gave me hindsight into, okay, this is how, you know, my employees felt during this time,
Mm,
et cetera.
mm.
So,
Yeah, and I think how we as leaders make people feel, I think that's essential.
mhm,
So, like I said, I started off with a bit of a negative where I shared a real quote that had a very big knock-on effect even on myself. Now, how it is at the end of the day, the way we treat our people will actually determine how long they'll actually stick around for as well. And I think that's also a real essential piece of the puzzle when it comes to, you know, doing great things and delivering great products. It is part of our teams that will actually help get that out the door and make it happen. Um, Growing them, educating them, giving, I think, more than
mhm,
receiving is actually, I think that plays a big factor in making sure that you've got happy people on your workforce.
I agree. I always told my team that I want them to be able to take my position,
Yes,
like plus some. I want them to do better than what I ever did,
I love that.
and teach them. So I feel like the more you invest in your people, the better you'll be anyway.
Exactly, exactly. And those that, you know, there was a, I love quotes, as you probably gathered, but there was somebody who said, you know, so what if I educate my team and, you know, they leave? And the response to that, well, what if you educate them and they don't leave? So, you know,
Mhm.
there's two mindsets standing right in front of you when you hear such quotes like that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, the motivation for me to come to this session was um, uh, I use a lot of what I know from being a leader myself in the past. When I work with teams, when I see teams with a technical lead on the team, and when working with a C-level executive who actually employs not only one but several of those leadership
Yeah.
styles, and kind of being able to recognize them is helpful, because sometimes they shift in an unexpected way, and that's
Mm.
something that I need to be able to call out because I have a clear picture of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say shift in a specific way, do you have an example of that?
Um, I recently worked for a company where the VP of technology had actually came from being a programmer in the startup phase. So
Okay.
he had a very specific version of what Agile means,
Mm-hmm.
um, in his mind, but then the company scaled to over 1,000 people, and that's just not working the same way. And
Yeah.
you cannot say, okay, you self-organize, but whenever it gets uncomfortable for yourself as a leader, you then walk down the hallway and you pick out those people who do not conform to your idea of
Mm.
agile. Yeah, and for me, seeing the signal of, hey, people crying in retrospectives, so that made me curious what's going on with the
Yeah.
leadership style here
That's
in this
interesting.
organization.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I think we have to be careful with the title leader as well. So in some cases when so I have a bit of an allergy to titles in some cases, because I think sometimes in some organizations the wrong titles are given, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but let's just say, for example, you're in a large 10,000 people organization and you're getting a title like MD or VP or director, etc. it's not the same as working as a director in a smaller company, for example, and even having a title of lead in such an organization. What tends to happen is it automatically introduces hierarchies. And we need to be so careful with job titles as well. I think job titles and clear roles and responsibilities also plays a huge part in how your people respond, not just to the leadership, but also to one another as well. And we really need to find a way to give the right titles that yield outcomes rather than egos, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I can speak from my own experience here. When I was a leader, I had people in my team who would earn more than me.
Yeah.
And only if you make that possible because of their skill set, because of their
Yes.
knowledge, where you appreciate monetarily their work that's not related to a title, only then will they really truly be motivated to give
Absolutely.
their best. Because otherwise you press them into becoming leaders in title,
That's it.
which oftentimes sometimes something they don't want, but of course they want to grow financially. So if we start designing those systems of remuneration in a way that allows for that to happen, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess there's a level of training that comes into there as well. Like, for example, if we look at stats today, I saw it, I don't remember where I read it. Sorry, my memory's going. I don't know what's going on, but but I read a stat recently saying 55% of leadership people in leadership roles haven't been trained. They've just been promoted. And that's a scary stat from my point of view, because I think that can do scary things as
I
well.
would have assumed more. Yeah.
Yeah.
And often this is because they are technically good at something. It might be a developer that's just really good, have been doing it for a long time, but as you say, they haven't been equipped or supported with the necessary training to be the best at that role.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that was the problem with the company I worked for fairly recently, because I've I've had management director level roles, but I went in as a kind of junior sort of. It's not a anyway. It doesn't matter what the job was, but I felt that some of the supervisors didn't really know how to manage people and support them. And if I tried to make a suggestion, it was resented. So
Yeah.
I was a temp, and a couple of people really did not like temps. It's
Yeah,
just like,
that's an interesting dynamic as
everyone
well.
is doing the same job. It doesn't really matter who pays you. It's
Exactly, and I think that's another factor that does stem from leadership as well. Is that having that kind of, we're a team, and being part of a team and building teams that doesn't matter where you're from. It really doesn't. So you've got that big vision, you've got that one goal, you've got your North Star. Let's all just follow that, and it's just sharing things like that rather than again job titles.
But I think it's also respecting the background of where somebody has come from, because I run meetups, usually like face-to-face ones, and I want to get to know everybody and what's important to them. And some people are just not interested in that at this company. And I was actually told it doesn't matter what you did before, because and oh, okay, all right.
That is interesting. Yeah, and I've been there as well, where people
Okay.
yeah. So I think it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Where when we're in the public domain and people have heard of us, and we have given back, and we've given them lots of kind of knowledge and things through our meetups and through our communities, and then we enter a work world where people have never heard of us. It's an interesting thing where when you want to openly share that knowledge with them as well, and they don't want to hear it because it's like, I don't quite know what might be going through their minds at the time, but it is an interesting point you're making there.
Yes, I felt like from running the meetups that I know what I'm doing and everybody will be nice to me. Right? And they'll appreciate what I'm doing. And I realized that it's not like that. Or I'd forgotten that going out and working in a place where you don't know everybody and they've got ways of doing stuff that they might not like your suggestions. So I guess I probably learned quite a lot from it, even if it was uncomfortable at the time. So,
Yeah, exactly. I think it's being adaptive again, isn't it?
yeah.
All right, folks. think we are probably about there to wrap up. We have some other great sessions lined up in the next few weeks. We've got Cliff Hazel, who used to work for Spotify. It's going to be joining us next week. We've got an AI specialist. I know AI was mentioned a few times today. Going to be joining us next month as well. So we've got a good few sessions lined up. Don't forget to check out our meetup group to see which ones those are. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. Loved your interaction, loved your insights you shared. And of course, thank you again, Sheetal, for joining us and sharing those great tips and insights on leadership.
It's been great having me here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.